start. We will be starting in a few moments. We're just going to let people sort of join. Just bear with us for a couple of moments. There's quite a few people coming in today, so I will just give them 30 more seconds if that's okay. Brilliant, wonderful. Okay. People are going to keep coming in, but there's no beeping, so we'll be okay to start. So good afternoon. I'm Richard Ayres. I'm a social care advisor at Care England, and I want to welcome you today to our third and final webinar session of the Cyber Security series with our phenomenal colleagues at the Digital Care Hub and the Cyber Centre of Excellence. This session today is designed to give care leaders, managers and frontline teams clear, jargon-free guidance on how to protect their organisations from the growing cyber threats that we see in social care. Today's session combines practical learning with interactive elements, and we'll finish with an open Q&A so you can raise any specific concerns that you have or anything that you've heard related to your settings. You can ask us directly or ask the panel directly. Today's format will consist of myself covering the basic housekeeping. I shall then introduce Curtis from CCOE, who will spend around 20 minutes taking you through a few slides. And then he will introduce Sam, our ethical hacker from the Digital Care Hub, who will again introduce himself and speak for another sort of 20 minutes or so to talk through his slides. We'll then have a 15-minute Q&A session, followed by an optional 30-minute Q&A session, which people seem to be staying for because they're liking the questions that we're asking and getting the answers. So there are no daft questions. So if you are not comfortable asking a question, putting something in the chat or raising a hand when we come to the Q&A, you can send me an email and I'll drop my email address into the chat. So you can send me an email directly and I will ask that question anonymously on your behalf if that's helpful. When Curtis and Sam are talking, you are free to use the Q&A function to raise any questions privately during the presentation, and we'll put those to the panel during the Q&A session. Curtis and Sam are quite talented. They sometimes answer them while they're talking, but otherwise we'll address them if they don't after the session. I will ask you to keep yourselves on mute. I think it does it automatically anyway during the presentation. However, after Curtis and Sam have finished talking, you'll be able to raise your hand and come in and ask those questions directly. So we are recording the sessions, and our intent is, as always, to note any unanswered questions and send a copy of the recording slides and any answered questions afterwards, along with some support materials and contact details for our speakers today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Curtis to kick us off today. Curtis.
Thank you very much, Richard. So I'm going to be going through the main agenda for today. So today our main focus is on resilience, recovery and incident response. So we all know the age-old adage of fail to prepare and prepare to fail. So the kind of theme of this talk today is for us to go through what you need to do to make sure that you are resilient, and for what you need to do for recovery and how you deal with incident response. So I'm mainly going to be dealing with that latter part, the incident response, and how to go through it. So I'm going to go through a quick note on the dark web scans that we did for people that signed up after workshops 1 and 2, and then going through how to implement practical cybersecurity incident response templates and checklists in your organization, maintaining business continuity in the event of a cyber attack, that's the main theme, and then the future of cyber resilience in the care sector, which is then over to Sam. So before we begin, a quick note on the dark web report. So everybody that was in workshop 1 and 2 and the emails from it afterwards will know that there was an opportunity to sign up for a free dark web report courtesy of the Cyber Centre of Excellence, which I run, and you should have all have received it by now. So that report will include whether any email addresses or passwords were found for your organisation on the dark web, so it'll be specifically related to the domain that you signed up with, using our advanced tools and cyber analysts. So if you didn't sign up for the report, but you would like to arrange for one and hear more about our digital risk protection service, which is vulnerabilities in dark web, then feel free to email inquiries@ccoe.org.uk. And if you've got any questions on the dark web reports, feel free to email that address as well, and we can come back to you specifically. So well done for everyone who signed up. So on to the main event. We're going through incident response planning, and I'm just going to go through a quick simplified version. So first steps are prepare to fail. Incident response planning is really the last point of your defenses. So it's the kind of bit that you're expecting to get to only if everything else has gone wrong. That does not mean it's any less important, and it does not mean at all that you should just leave it, because the plan is that we never fail and that things don't get hacked and don't happen to us. That's obviously the hope, but we need to plan to fail and then make that preparation okay. So first off, need to report the attack. So if something happens, the first thing to do is report the attack, so that then you can assemble the emergency response team. So that's effectively your IT Avengers or your organization's superheroes, whoever it may be. It might be your C-suite, it might be your directors or your management, but every organization should know who their emergency response team will be, and the first people to quantify from it. Then you need to triage, identify, and quarantine. So you're looking for what is it, how do we identify it, and how do we lock it down, to then make sure that you're preventing additional damage. Don't worry if this is going over your head a little bit, that's not an issue. The slides will be sent out to everybody afterwards as well. You can always ask us any questions if you've got for it. But this is just a quick summary version for things you should have to hand. So we're prioritizing data security, so making sure that the data is as protected as it can be at that point in time. Communicate what you need to who you need to. So who needs to know what's happened? Do you need to update the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, if it's personal data? Do you need to put out a public statement? Do you need to speak to customers so that we can tie it in? Sorry, I'll try to slow down. Thank you. And record everything. There's a lot for me to get through, so I'm trying to rapidly go through it, but I'll try to slow my speech down. Record everything that you've done, so that you are tying it in to, so that you've got a record of everything that has happened from when the incident first starts. And that's basically make sure that you've got the documentation, so you can go back through. And the key part for that is for your lessons learned. So you can look at what you did do and work out what you didn't do, work out what you should have done, could have done, would have done in the back end. Engage your experts. So they might be in-house, they might be external, but basically just speak to the people that are correct from it, and then make sure it's all combated and resolved. So that would then be making sure it's all tying in properly. Then conduct a damage assessment and update your learnings. So make sure that then the damage is resolved, and you know that there's a final kind of point to it. So you want to make sure there is a clear finishing line for when a line is drawn in the sand and you can say, yep, okay, we're done with that. It doesn't mean that the actions stop there. It just means this is the point where you're saying, okay, that's the close of the incident, and now we're moving on with whatever the new normal might look like. Then update and educate your staff. So you're then taking the lessons learned and you're making sure that you're communicating that to everybody you can. So quick reminder of the cyber threat and problem. I'm not going to go through all of these parts, but it's just a little reminder for you. So cyber attack is not a new threat. We still keep sometimes just talking about the threat of cyber or cyber threat, but it's not a cyber threat. It's now a cyber problem. This is something that's happening constantly and every day. It is a growing cyber threat, but it is now something that is a problem for everybody. So there's been a sharp rise in the use of Internet of Things and operation technology and other things. But it's that in the home and in the office and taking it through. This means that cyber criminals have got a bigger attack surface than ever before. It just means that they have more ways in than they've ever had previously. So there are also 4 cyber wars currently playing out globally that the UK are involved in, with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. The UK are quite heavily involved in the first 2 and on the edges of the latter 2. As a result of this, we're seeing in the UK a significant number of state-sponsored attacks against all organisations in the UK, but that includes small organisations. So something that I've said frequently to people is, even if you've got a small organisation, it isn't somebody similar to fishing that I said in workshop 1. It isn't somebody in a little dinghy with a fishing rod looking to pick up a mackerel. It is a trawling ship that is going through an entire area, and it will sweep up everything that's in its path. So and that's also against, there's also then everyday hackers that are trying to just chance their luck too. So it's just a keynote to be aware that this is something that every organization does need to be taking seriously. So you must make sure you've got a strong defense. Now, typically, you need to be able to respond to attacks with a budget usually measured in billions. Obviously, I very much doubt any of us have got billions to hand. If you do, please share the wealth. So we need to achieve that military grade response at high street pricing. So that's where CCOE is coming forward and trying to help make those jumps for you, so that we can effectively say this is a good product and it's not going to cost you the earth. So one of the biggest things you can do for yourselves, and it's wonderful because it's fairly cost effective because you can do it internally, is planning for when it all goes wrong. Now again, that doesn't mean that it's inevitably going to go wrong, but you should have a plan in place that does. And one of the best ways that I think to plan is to act a scenario out. So that's what we're going to be doing now, is tying this in to set up a tabletop project brief which is why I've flown through that last bit, so that we can then get to this part, which is the main meat of it. So we're going to be going through an example tabletop exercise, so an imagined scenario, and for each part you should be thinking about problems and solutions that may be found relating to people, to processes, to technologies, and to data. So I've put them in blue because they're key pillars and key pillars of cybersecurity. But the key question to keep in mind is, how would you respond and recover from each stage, and what would be learned for the future to prevent recurrence? So how would you respond, how would you recover, and what would you learn from this to prevent it from happening in the future? Now, on that note, I'm just going to highlight that for this part, if you've got any questions related to the kind of tabletop project brief or any cyber questions, please use the Q&A function, and then Richard will pick them up with Sam and I at the end of the Q&A session. However, if you're just answering to parts that I'm talking about, or you've got ideas of things you would like to go through for this part, then please put it into the chat, and I'll pick up on that as well, so I can see the chat, and I hope everybody's sound issues have been resolved. So I'm going to move on with the tabletop scenario now. Please do engage with it and just jump in if you've got any suggestions, any concerns, or any individual parts that might take it in. So a key part for any tabletop exercise is that you should never be doing one individual part, because a problem is rarely just one individual thing. So if you're hit with a ransomware scenario, which is what this scenario is, it's very, very unlikely that it's going to be just the ransomware onto a couple of machines and then that's it sorted and found, and then it's all resolved. It tends to be that an incident starts and snowballs. So there's always kind of stages to it. It's very easy to see those stages retrospectively afterwards. At the time, it might just feel like it's almost business as usual, or things just kind of snowballing. But it's the highlighting that that you need to be able to have these kind of focuses on each individual part. So when we do these exercises, I try to build them into having multiple scenarios, because that really gets you kind of thinking about what's happening. So we've got 6 stages to this, and I'm just going to go through some considerations for each part. So when you're looking at putting together your emergency response team, you should make sure you've got the right responsibilities and focus as key roles. So is your IT manager there and their team, or it might be your managed service provider, your IT department, or outsourced IT? Do you have a data protection officer? If so, they should be there, especially if data has been impacted. Do you have a CISO or an equivalent, so a chief information security officer? If so, they should be there, or whoever is the equivalent of the head of data, head of IT, head of technology. Your emergency planning team in general, so it might be heads of business, directors, it might be heads of function, it might be middle management, it might be everybody who's involved in the team, whoever can be of assistance. And then naturally senior management, so CEO and other board members, including other directors. So it depends on the individual scope of your organization on how that works, but just make sure that you've got them in the right in the room, or made aware if something happens. For each stage, think about things like your budget limitations and priorities, your time and resources, anything that impacts governance, policies, and practices, particularly for the care sector. Communication internally and publicly, so what do you need to say to your teams versus what do you need to say externally, and how can you do it if you don't have access? Any avenues for collaboration, so can you get in touch with other organizations that can support you? Can you work with your IT MSP? Can you work with Care England or CCOE or Digital Care Hub to be able to support? And how you can then improve resilience for all parties involved, so how you can then look at it afterwards. So as I said, the slides are going out to everybody, so this is just kind of just running through what a tabletop scenario looks like, but feel free to jump in if you've got any queries. So stage 1 starts. So imagine on your machine, you suddenly get an image that pops up to say your machine has been ransomware. There's a skull and crossbones, it has a pirate message, and it says that you need to pay a certain amount of Bitcoin to be able to unlock it. This is now, you've realized you've looked left and right in the office, or you've spoken to other people, and it's everybody's machines this has happened to in your organization. So all work and processes have now stopped, as everything needs to be shut down on the network, and no one has access to anything held on the network. So that's the current scenario. You have access to nothing on your normal network. It then escalates. So the incident has now escalated as your care plans for residents are inaccessible. So you've realized, well, actually, you still have to carry on with your day jobs. So everything else that the company would ordinarily do still needs to be happening. And the care plans are inaccessible. So it's not fully clear which parts of the organization have been affected and which parts haven't, because your communications are limited. Or if the website's been impacted as part of the same incident. So you don't know how much of everyday life has been affected, but you still have to get on with the individual part of it. So I'm assuming that this is going to cause fair pandemonium for most of you on the call. If you think that actually this is just easy enough to brush off and brush under the carpet, then please let me know. But this is where you're currently at in the stage. The next part is then media pressure. So this has now become public. People are aware that this is happening to your organizations. This might be a couple of days later. These things are rarely resolved in a couple of hours, so it might be a couple of days later. So the press and regulators, think of organizations like CQC, families of people in your care, and commissioners are now all asking for updates on the situation. So if you still have phone lines, they will be ringing fairly frequently. If not, they'll be looking for mobile numbers or looking for ways to contact. It might be, depending on the situation, that people are turning up at the door. So a sensible thing for everyone to think about now, and I do mean right now, is what kind of message can you pre-prepare that you can get sign-off from your CEO for an incident like this? Because any messaging and communications you can plan ahead of time saves you significant hassle when this is happening, when everybody's adrenaline is flooded, when everybody is stressed about trying to work out their individual parts. So any messaging that you can kind of get already pre-approved and pre-planned, obviously it will need to be tweaked related to the current incident, but anything that you can get pre-approved will save you some significant time at the stage of this. So think about that then. So the person responsible for public relations is going to be under significant pressure. They're going to need answers and solutions as soon as possible. So whether the person responsible for public relations is an actual individual role, whether it's the chief exec, whether it's one of yourselves, whether it's just a public face of the company, that person is going to be under fair scrutiny because they're the person representing what's happening within the company. So they also need to be prepared for that kind of pressure. It's then become clear during the same part that, so it might be the media have told you this, that personal data has been breached during the ransomware encryption. And so the ICO, Information Commissioner's Office, needs to be updated and needs to be alerted. So under GDPR, including GDPR for the UK, you have 72 hours to alert the ICO. Now, it's 72 hours to alert the ICO, not 72 hours to fix the problem, not 72 hours to give them a full report, 72 hours to tell them that the issue is going on. That can just be an email to their email address. It's available on their website, and there's a contact form to basically tell them this is happening, and you just put in as much information as you have at the time. So if you know that it is a case that data has likely been done, but taken, but you don't know how much, you just say that. You just say, we're under a ransomware attack. We're trying to triage it. We're trying to work out what's happening. These are the parts that we've got to, but we don't have any more information yet. As soon as you've emailed them and you've done it, you are then have space to breathe from ICO. They will ask you then to follow up with a report afterwards, but there is no then immediate time limit on it. You need to respond back to them within 30 days, but your legal obligation to alert them in 72 hours, is then done. So make sure that is within your business continuity plans. If you don't have a business continuity plan, do this as a start. Don't start writing the plan. Do this first. Bullet point everything you've kind of found, then write off a business continuity plan afterwards. So stage 4 might be something like backup failure. So you've done the obvious that everybody immediately kind of thinks about, as you've tried to restore a backup. Unfortunately, it's failed because the backup was also infected. Now, that can be very, very difficult because that means that your organization has probably been targeted. If your backup has also failed, excuse me, if your backup has also failed, it means that the organization has been targeted specifically and the attack has gone on to the backup too. So those within the care community are then asking why this has happened, how it can be resolved, and how it can be avoided in the future. So these are going to be lots of questions that they ask at the time. So it's well worth thinking about it beforehand and how often your backups are done. So you should have 3 levels of backup essentially. And Sam and I will cover this a little bit later, and we can talk more about it in a Q&A if you like. But you should always have 3 levels of backup: a daily backup that basically includes everything, but goes then ideally offline. A second backup that is completely air-gapped. Air-gapped just means it's not connected to your network, so it goes one way, and it should be immutable, which means it cannot be changed. And then a third backup, ideally in a separate place or a different operating system. And that just means, and you might do that one once a month or once a quarter or once a year, depending on your appetite. But effectively, that then means you've got the go-to backup. But if that's been affected, you've got a second backup. And if that's also something's gone wrong with that, like it doesn't load or it's been I've forgotten the word now, but it's messed itself up, then you can go to another backup. So this is a good point to kind of look at what your backup scenarios are and how they work. But for the sake of the scenario, the backup has failed and has been impacted. So you've then gone back to the vendor, whoever it might be, your IT outsourced company. It might be a separate backup solution altogether. But you've then gone to them and you've asked them to restore an older backup on your behalf. This backup is functional and has loaded, but it only has data up to 2 months ago. So this is a really good point, and it's a really good part to focus on within the scenario. Everybody kind of thinks of dealing with an incident is dealing with the first 24 hours or 36 hours or first week even, and then after that everything is back to kind of normal. That is very rarely the case. It's happening more frequently now, which is wonderful to see, but that depends on your backups and your solutions in place. More likely is that you have lost a certain amount of backup. So then this is a good opportunity to work out, well, what do I need to do today, tomorrow, this week, this month, your kind of task list, as much as you can remember off the top of your head, because you might not have access to it. And how is an incident like this going to affect that? How would it actually impact your day-to-day kind of work? Could everybody carry on because you've got things printed out? So actually you can wait for the computers to be working again because you've got printed policies and procedures where you need them? Or is it a case of, well, actually, we would have no idea what had happened in this area and we would need a backlog? And then for this side, you're thinking about, okay, what have I done in the past, in this example, 2 months, that I would lose, that would be critical for me doing the work that I need to do today, tomorrow, and next, because then you've got to rebuild that picture. So there's a scary part, but it is a reality. So plan for how that would look and how you would reallocate resourcing in order to be able to put it back together. So it's now become clear that it was in fact the same ransomware that impacted the backup, which means that you were targeted, but it's still not certain where it was initiated. So there are options to find out how a ransomware attack came in. After everything's been ransomwared, the IT team and security team might focus on just actually getting rid of the system completely and rebuilding it from scratch and from backups. So they might not be able to find anything from it. You can then get forensics, and it depends on your own organization's appetite for how much you want to know where it came from. My kind of role and my job in governance and compliance is effectively making sure that the company can carry back on. Finding what caused it is useful, in it then tells you what happened and how do we prevent it from happening. But if we know it's a ransomware attack, then it's a fairly reasonable assumption that somebody has likely clicked on a link or downloaded something they shouldn't have done, and it's got past the endpoint response, so Microsoft Defender or Checkpoint or BitLocker, Bitwarden, or whatever it is you might be using as your antivirus or endpoint detection response. Antivirus is just a new word for it. So that's a fairly reasonable thing to come from. So then the lesson learned there is, okay, we need more security on our endpoints to make sure that this can't happen. So that's the key focus from it. How much you investigate where it came from is entirely up to your organization's appetite. If it's really, really important to work out exactly who clicked on the email, then that's something that you can spend a significant amount of money doing. In my personal opinion, that does not help with the company culture because just working out who clicked on it to point blame at them doesn't do anything to help support the company improving in the future, because anybody could have clicked on that link. I've told this story a couple of times. It's now becoming a bit of a meme for myself, but I've managed to fall for my own phishing simulation previously. I obviously didn't have enough coffee that day. So anybody can click on the link. The important thing is the lessons learned should be training for everybody, and that goes right up to your directors and your chief execs and anybody else on the board, as well as anybody running in the organization, and then also making sure that everything ties back up to the training, endpoint security, and any lessons learned that you can take from the scenario. So it's just making it clear from that. So where it was initiated is still not certain. It depends on your own organization and your IT team on how much investigation is going to be done into that part. The part for the business, though, is focusing on, well, how do you deal with it? It doesn't matter how it happened specifically. It doesn't matter whether it was, Black Mamba, or whether it was Lockbit, or whatever the individual ransomware was. It's more important on, well, what was the impact on the organization and how do we prevent that from happening again? And then stage 6 is fallout. So you now need to explain to your board and to your members and to everybody who's involved in your organization, all the stakeholders, so families, customers, clients, partners, etc., that the previous 2 months of data have been lost and cannot be recovered. You will then also need to update the ICO, because this will contain personal data. So you'll need to explain to them, and you'll need to give them a report on what you're doing to improve things, what you did to prevent this from happening in the first place. And then also evidence of things like tabletop exercises are very useful, because it demonstrates that you are taking your active duty to protect the information clearly. So they've asked about, well, what about the option of paying the ransomware and the ramifications of of doing this or not? The current advice from NCSC, with the National Cybersecurity Centre for the UK, is not to pay the ransomware, because effectively you are funding criminals. So it can be very, very tempting, but also once you've paid them, there is no guarantee that they're not going to do it again. I'm going to leave that point there, but feel free to ask it in the Q&A, and Sam and I can discuss it further, because this is something that I think most cybersecurity professionals would say, don't pay the ransomware. But that's very, very difficult if you're the chief exec of the organization and there's 2 months of data that you need to get back. So, Rich, I can see you nodding your head, so I know that that's going to be the part. So we can expand that. What I reckon is the sensible thing to do is have that conversation with the organization internally before it ever happens. Make that part of your incident response planning and say, well, would we ever consider it? And let's look at the pros and the cons. The pros being, okay, you might get the data back and they're happy with that incident. Con being, okay, well, how do you prevent them from attacking you again? And they might not attack you because there is honor amongst thieves within this kind of area. So they typically won't attack you again because they've got their money out of you. But there is nothing to stop them telling their friends and other criminals then attacking you. We do see a lot where the same organization gets attacked, whether they're paid or not paid, 6 months later and 12 months later. It's almost like an automated thing of, you've probably forgotten now, so let's do it again. Which is one of my final points, is once you've finished doing this exercise and simulation, redo them. So go away, take off do your BCPs and your plans, make sure that you're then working out exactly what you would need to do to prevent this from happening in the first place, and then do another scenario in 6 months' time. Doesn't need to be the same scenario. It can be something else, like you've had a significant data breach or power loss at a key part of the organization, or anything else that comes to mind. There's lots of different templates and parts that you can access, and feel free to get in touch with us if you want any ideas or want us to support you with doing one. So you've determined that it was a malicious link sent out to all of your staff. Your IT team have managed to find the specific email and they've blocked it, but it was effectively a phishing attack that turned into a ransomware attack. Fortunately, the number of people that were fully affected with ransomware locking it down were relatively low in comparison to the size of the organization. However, the boards and the members and other stakeholders of the care community still want answers and support you and support to them from you, as they hold you accountable for their data loss, which is true, because if you are their data controller or the data processor, you have effectively been the one who's responsible for their data. So it's your security that has let them down. That feeling of disappointment and the impact on your brand and your reputation, etc., all also has to be planned. Another part where communications then tie in well. So speak to whoever's in charge of your marketing and communications publicly and internally, and kind of think about, well, what would we do if we were doing this in real life? And then think about anything else in the investigation and what would be the continued fallout. So effectively think of, right, okay, well, we've lost 2 months of data. We had an infected backup. We've had infected machines. That's now our new normal. That's happened. We can't undo it. So now what do we do from this point forward to prevent that from ever happening again, to minimize the damage from what's already happened? And what other things have we discovered about the organization and ourselves to be able to make that actually very worthwhile in the long run, to make sure it never happens again and to make sure that everyone's come out of it? And the final point I'm going to touch on, because I haven't mentioned it here yet before I pass over to Sam, is that as well as your lessons learned, so, and the key part being, if you can't run or answer how you'd respond to the scenario yourself, you can get some external help from us, which Sam's going to touch on. But if you don't know how to respond and recover from each individual stage, you also need to think about the lessons learned for the future for it. And a key part that people always forget about, because until you're doing it, you don't think about it: burnout. Burnout is a significant factor within incident response. So if you're thinking about the IT department, it might be 2 people, it might be 20, it might be 200, depending on the size of your organization. But each of those people are going to feel massively stressed, including everybody in the organization, because this isn't just, even if it's not your problem, and I'd argue this is everybody's problem because it's affecting the whole organization, there is a huge mental drain and burden, and a big impact on your body physically, because your adrenaline is spiking and your adrenaline is very high, and it's then in that permanent form of stress for quite some time. So keep in mind when you're doing these plans that this isn't, you're doing the response, and you're doing the plan in a day, in a couple of hours, and however your workshop is going to be. A real life incident would be days, weeks, and months, and possibly years, depending on the scope of the organization, the scope of the attack. So keep in mind that you also need to think about, right, well, actually, who stands in as the head of the emergency response team when the current head, whether it's your chief information security officer or your data protection officer or chief exec, when they're burnt out because they've now been in the office for 5 days constantly, how do you then move on from that, and make sure that they also get a chance to recover physically, go home and see their families, and then come back in, because the state of burnout is one that's going to actually be very pressing on your emotional and physical well-being and your ability to deal with the situation at hand. We only function very well when we've had a good night's sleep. So that's something to also think about, particularly if you've got a small team. You need to be thinking about, okay, well, how do you do the handover and swap overs between you so that you can still rest? Because it's the organisation as a whole that needs to deal with it, not every individual. And on that cheery note, I'm going to hand you over to Sam, who's going to talk a little bit about verifying and other parts, and we'll pick up other questions separately.
Thank you so much, Curtis. That was a comprehensive, quite a big look at incident response, which I absolutely love. As most of you know, Curtis and I are absolute nerds with this stuff. We love it. So if we speak too fast, if we say something, Richard is there to call us up on it or put it in Q&A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of zoom out a little bit because I know that incident response is quite a terrifying thing when you're not in the cybersphere. When you look at all those things that you're meant to do, think about it, it's quite difficult. So I'm going to zoom out and give a fairly simple way of building resilience to try and cut off that. So if we could just go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So, as I've just mentioned, resilience, recovery, response, it's a complex and always evolving responsibility for you as an organization, as an individual in that organization, your personal data life, all sorts of stuff. But when we're talking about organizations, easiest way if you're not a technical person is to break it up into more manageable chunks. And a way to do that is to use a framework such as DSPT, Cyber Essentials, or if you're feeling brave and a bit more technical, NIST. You can search for all those. I'm just going to look at the DSPT for this little chat because that's social care. I say here it's a free online self. Most of you will have heard, if not even gone through the DSPT yourselves. And as I say, it just looks at your protection policies, procedures, and processes. But I'll show you how you can use it to really build your resilience with stuff like this. So DSPT is for social care. It's specifically designed for adult care providers, and as I say, it's broken down into four bite-sized sections for you: staffing and roles, policies and procedures, data security, IT systems and devices. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through the full DSPT today. I'm going to zoom in on one thing for you to help you build resilience in a real way. Something I wanted to let you know about the DSPT. It's refreshed annually. As most of you know, you have to do it annually, but it's also refreshed nationally annually. And that's part of its ongoing development. And it changes as cyber threats and legal requirements change. You might have noticed a question of MFA coming up. I think it was last year or something like that. So that's why it changes every year, but it tries to keep it as non-technical as possible. I know there's a few technical things in there, but it's not too bad. And I say the way that they keep this refresh is that they'll add some questions, they'll update the wording of some questions, or they'll even remove some questions to help organizations build upon your own resilience. I say this makes it a useful living framework to adopt, immerse, and embed as a regular business practice for the sector as a whole. Go to the next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview. As I say, BSPT is an NHS thing, but it helps adult social care providers to improve data security. I think you all know what the DSPT is. It's an online self-assessment of your organization's data security, demonstrates compliance with data protection legislation. It's reviewed annually, and it's full of advice and is a checklist of good practice. It's got URLs in there. Those are links to send you to. I know somebody was asking about templates earlier. I'm not sure about media templates, although that's not a bad idea because every situation is difficult. We'd have to have about 1,000 different templates depending on what particular attack you've been through to have a media template, but it's something that Curtis and I can chat about. But as I say, the DSPT is full of links that you can click on and it goes away and sort of shows you different advice as stuff like that. So if we go forward, please. So the DSPT and cyber resilience, why is it good against people like me, thinking of me as a hacker, as a ethical hacker, but a hacker nonetheless. So what I've picked a few of the DSPT evidence items and show you why me trying to break into your organization, it helps. These aren't just picked at random to make your life more difficult. They are picked specifically to make my life as a hacker more difficult. So 424, does your organization have a reliable way of removing or amending people's access to IT systems when they leave or change roles? So when you go through that question, if you manage to do it properly and you embed it, then for me as a hacker, it's much harder for me to use stolen credentials. So stolen credentials is usually your username, which is your email address, and your password. Obviously, if you've got multi-factor authentication, that's also on here as well. But basically, that means if people leave your organization, I can't suddenly use their stuff if you've got a good policy and a good system in place to stop that. How does your organization make sure that staff, directors, trustees, and volunteers use good password practice? Any of you that have seen how quickly I can break into like 6-digit passwords will know why good password practice is important. Do all the computers and other devices used across your organization have antivirus, anti-malware, which is kept up to date? You can see all these questions, and me as a hacker, why it makes my life much more difficult. The one I want to concentrate on today to help you build resilience with some real tools and real advice is 10-2-1. Do your organization's IT system suppliers have cyber security certification? If you have an IT supplier who are up on it with cyber, it's much, much more difficult. And if you go to the next screen, I say next screen, next slide. Yes, 10-2-1. Do your organization's IT system suppliers have cybersecurity certification? Your organization should ensure that any supplier of IT systems have cyber security certification, says, for example, external such as Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001, or it being listed on digital marketplace, or by completing the toolkit themselves. I made this little figure. Hopefully this makes sense, but this is you as a manager or as an organizer trying to procure the amount of questions that you'll have in your head. So all these are different IT suppliers that I've made up. If there is a real one in there, I apologize. The things you've got to think about, obviously, you've got cost, location, responsiveness, popularity, are other people saying it? As somebody said, oh, these are really good. Approachability, are they good with your staff? Are they responsive? Availability, are they there 24 hours a day? Do you need 24 hours a day? All these questions, quite often you forget about cyber. And as you've just gone through with Curtis, the cyber incident response, if something goes wrong, it is quite a complex and difficult process. And just building on that, I remember when peeling back a little bit now, when I built incident response plans back at HSBC, exactly as Curtis said, we knew that burnout was a real issue. So we absolutely put in forced breaks if something was happening after hours, after days, after weeks, after months, and after years if something happened, because we know it's incredibly stressful when something like this happens. And if you're in an organization and something happens, it could be even worse because it's everything. The lizard brain kicks in, you freeze. If you have a good business continuity plan, if you've got an incident response checklist ready to go, it just makes your life much, much easier. I went off piece a little bit there, but never mind. So if we go to the next slide, please. So, for us in the social care sector, who actually looks after our IT? Now, obviously, we often think of IT teams and stuff like that. Now, IT doesn't always mean cyber, and cyber doesn't always mean IT. There was a little bit earlier on this where I was backup. If anything technical happened with Zoom, I don't know how to fix Zoom, so I was panicking that I wouldn't know what to do if something happened. Luckily, the team stepped in and we were absolutely fine. But you've got to remember that cyber and IT are very closely linked, but they're not identical. You cannot assume that somebody who provides your IT knows anything about cyber and vice versa. So, in care organizations, your IT is often looked after by a managed service provider. An MSP is an external company that manages your organization's IT system on an ongoing basis. You'll all know this. What they typically do, you can see, set up and maintain laptops, tablets, phones. They manage staff accounts and passwords, provide help desk support when things go wrong. They maintain, you can see, they do all this kind of stuff, backup systems and data. And most of us use MSPs because we're too small for an in-house IT team, or we need support across multiple sites or in the community. We've got limited technical expertise internally, so we need to like pick somebody like that. Or IT is needed 24/7, and we can't do that as an organization. We're either too small or others, or our staff are focused on actually delivering care rather than being IT experts, which is why in our sector we quite often rely on MSPs. But if you remember back to that 10-2-1 in the DSPT, do your organization's IT system suppliers have cyber security certification? And then that awful word next to it, mandatory. if you've got an IT supplier and they don't have any cyber certification, if something goes wrong, there is no guarantee that they can help you. To be honest, and Curtis will back me up with this, even if they have certification, there's no guarantee, but it just helps. It builds your resilience that little bit more if you start looking at this. I'm going to take you through ways that you can check on your MSP. Make sure that you select a good vendor and ways to do that. And then I'll show you that actually Curtis does a really good job as well. So if you're going to choose a vendor and you're going to do it yourself, um, obviously, this depends on what you've got at the moment, what setup you have, how long you've got an agreement with, if there's a breakout clause, and all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to say who I worked for, but we had an issue where it was signed up for 5 years at a time, which obviously is a real struggle if you suddenly realize that you need somebody with cyber or instant response or something to help you out with something like that. If you're stuck in a 5 year contract with somebody who can't match what you need them, it's difficult. So these are things on top of everything else you have to think about. But some basic due diligence for vendors. When you're questioning them on their cyber, don't say, do you? Say, how do you? Okay? Because if I say, do you encrypt data? I can say, yes. And that's it. And I'll pass your due diligence. If you say, how do you encrypt your data? And I come back with a better answer. The thing is, you don't have to fully speak the language that Curtis and I use. You can use me or Curtis, or you can even use like AI to help interpret what somebody has said. I know the Cyber Center of Excellence, and Curtis has quite a good thing where if you've got some supply, Curtis, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but if you've got some suppliers that you're thinking of, you can pass them to Curtis and their team, and they can come back to you with some due diligence based on that. Yeah, good. I'm getting the nod. Glad I know go on. But yeah, your basic due diligence is just like thinking of a questionnaire. How do you promote good security culture in your organization? How do you ensure suitable physical controls are in place? These are the kind of things that a good managed service provider will happily share with you because they want the business, they understand what they're doing, and they also understand that you might hold really sensitive data and they're going to be partially responsible for that. Don't forget, if your MSP goes down and you lose data, the ICO will come to you, not to them, if they've been a failure. So you need to make sure that you've done some due diligence. Little note here, AI companies, they themselves might have certification, but the output doesn't. That's just part of it. Biggest thing, external verification over marketing language. All your IT companies are going to say things like, we use the industry standard X, Y, and Z. Our security is state of the art. Ignore most of that. A lot of that is marketing language, and they want your business. Sadly, just like you have in with builders, plumbers, cyber people, there are people who are rogue traders in the IT who will say they can do things. They even sometimes have a good. I tried to use my mouse and I realized you can't see my mouse. But some IT suppliers will have badges on their website that they've built that don't actually mean anything. They might have, yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Like the ISO 27701 might be on their website, but they don't actually have that. They just know that that looks good and most people won't question on it. So external verification over marketing language hype. Here is our live Cyber Essentials Plus certificate. Here's our live DSPT publication. Just on that, when it comes to DSPT, I'd generally expect a small IT company to be a category 3 other, and I'd expect a larger IT company to be category 1 as an IT supplier. I wouldn't expect a small IT firm to go all the way to category 1 IT supplier because that is based on NHS supply. That's just my thing. There's no rule about that. That's just my thinking. Here's our current ISO 2700 certificate, and we are an NCSC, which we've mentioned, the National Cyber Security Centre. I always get it wrong. I think I got it right there. Assured provider, here's our live listing. And these are the kind of things that it looks like. You can see your Cyber Essential Plus, ISO certification. And the next slide, here's how you actually verify that. It's really quite simple. It's basically a list of websites. Oh, Denise, category 3. Oh God, I could do a whole thing on this. I'll do it in the Q&As if that's okay. I'll talk about the SPT categories in the Q&As. On this, when you're choosing vendors, checking people's certification is dead simple. It's just a website. You all know DSPT, or most of you know to look for yourself on the DSPT. You can look for other companies as well. I'll be honest, it's less likely an IT company will be on there because it's more social care, but it is a really useful thing to ask them to go through because then they can start to see what your standards are and they can make sure that they match and hopefully go above and beyond it. IASME is the one where you check if somebody's got a Cyber Essentials certificate, if it's live, if it's past due, if it's been done correctly. IAF certificate is for iOS. I say those, and then SOC 2 you can go into. These are just a few websites that you can use to quickly type in a company name. If they've told you, yep, we've got Cyber Essentials Plus, and you have a look and it went out of date 5 years ago, maybe think about that. And then NCSC themselves have some good things. You can search directly for assured services that they've got. Or they've got a really good supplier assurance questions. That's things that you can ask them. Or as I said, if this all seems a bit much, come to somebody like me, or I say Curtis and CCOE have a really good system where if you've got a few suppliers you're thinking of, pass them to Curtis. I'm just giving you work, Curtis. Sorry. Pass them to Curtis, and he'll do a bit of this kind of thing for you. They've got their own system, but I'm, basically going, okay, these match your requirements. Yes, so these links are coming out. I've built this so it's in the printout and in this as well, so you can just click on them. And next slide. This is my penultimate slide, and there's a lot of text on here, but that is because over the past three webinars, you've heard Curtis and myself nerd out about all sorts of stuff. Some of it complex, some of it less so. This is a bit of summary of everything to build your resilience as an organization, start thinking about doing something about it. So we've been through good practice, password practice, different passwords for different logins. If you're going to prioritize, make sure it's like email, banking, and stuff like that, but ideally different password for everything. Longer the better, three random words to help you memorize, and enforce multi-factor authentication and use a password manager with breach monitoring to keep you as safe as possible. I say training and exercises, keep yourself and any staff refreshed, things like this, there's YouTube videos, there's all sorts going on. I think Care England has a page full of things that are happening all the time, which is pretty good. As I say, there's plenty of good free and paid training out there. Don't struggle alone. And I've said this a few times. It is complex, is this? So use a framework to assist you and your organization, say, such as DSPT, which breaks it down into questions. Cyber Essentials is a bit broader, but it covers some of the basic cyber controls you should have in. Make sure that you adopt, immerse, and embed them though. None of these should be seen as tick box exercises. These aren't just something you have to get done. This is to help you build your resilience against something that happens. And I know sometimes the questions seem weird, but they are built to try and build that resilience as much as possible. And as I say, reach out for help. Obviously, you've got Care England, you've got Cyber Centre of Excellence, and you've got us at Digital Care Hub. All of us, absolutely, well, apart from Richard, who isn't quite the nerd, but we're all absolutely willing to help you. Sorry, Richard. You might be a nerd. I might have been wrong.
A nerd in some things, but definitely not cyber and IT.
But all of us are absolutely willing to help you. We love this stuff, and we just want you to be the best version of yourselves that you can be. Other things, my big bugbear suppliers, check certifications and real controls, not just marketing promises. They are trying to sell you a product. If you have to treat them the same as anything in a shop. If it's too good to be true, just have that extra little bit of thought and going, okay, they sound really good, and my neighbor uses them, or my another organization I'm friendly with uses them, but do they have these certifications? Do they have the appreciation? If something goes wrong, are they going to have my back? Can they help me? Can they help my staff? That's what the kind of things you need to be thinking about. And as I say that never rely solely on others use it. Unfortunately, it's not always the case that just because other people use it, it's absolutely safe. We've seen that with massive supply chain failures in the past. And let's have a look. Social engineering, which we covered a little bit, and that's something that me as an ethical hacker will use, especially Things like LinkedIn, I'll find all sorts of information there on Company's House. So review your privacy settings, limit what personal info is visible. Pause and think, does any message that you create, whether that's a phone call, a Teams call, a text message or WhatsApp, a Signal, I don't think anybody uses Signal other than me, but a few people might do. But any message like that, just pause if it creates urgency. So if it's got authority, scarcity, or time pressure, just take a moment before acting. If it's starting to make you feel an emotion, that's when you try and take a breath, have a cup of tea, and then try and react to it. But verify before you trust. Obviously, independently confirm requests for sensitive info, payments, or urgent actions via a separate channel. If your CEO is telling you to do something on one thing, just give them a quick call or a message on a different thing. Make sure it is who they say they are. Patch and catch. Keep everything up to date. Use anti-malware, which is your antivirus. As I say, if you've got a good MSP, they'll have all this set up for you, but you need to be understand enough to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing, and use auto updates where available to make your life easier. So you don't have to constantly update every individual thing. Just as a thing that I never thought about, but a lot of people understand that Windows auto updates can be switched on, which updates, that doesn't update all your software. That just updates Windows. So if you've got Adobe Acrobat, you need to make sure that you're updating that. If you've got an antivirus program, you need to make sure that that's being updated. It's not a one and done with Microsoft Update, for example, which is why auto updates selected across the board on everything you use is the best bet because it just keeps on doing it, unless it's Notebook plus plus, but that's a separate issue. Business continuity, plan, test, repeat, and have fun with these tabletop exercises. I know it's difficult to have fun with stuff like that, but you can create scenarios that still builds that awareness within your team, who does what, when. And as Curtis says, make sure that you put some timings in there. What are you going to do if something is out of action for an hour? What are you going to do if something's out of action for a day, a week, a month, and a year? Once you start thinking like that, you become super resilient because you're like, we know what's going to happen if the power is off for a week. We've got this backup generator. And a business continuity plan is a living document, not a one and done template. It's something that you build on each time something happens. So if you know where the collection point for a fire test is, that's exactly the kind of thing. So a very basic business continuity plan, if you're a tiny micro organization or just one or two people, it could be some emergency phone numbers pinned to a board if the electricity goes out. That's the very basics of it, right up to a proper one that Curtis has showed you through, which I'd fully recommend that you start embedding when you can. Digital twinning, this is a little bit technical now, but I think it's good that we put it in there. Create a virtual replica of systems or process, uses data to avoid breaking operational essential systems or processes. Basically, if something breaks, you've got a twin version of it. You can both test on it to make sure your resilience is actually working, but also if something falls over, you've got something that you can switch to. Think of it like a super backup, but it's not just a backup, it's a backup of like processes and everything else, as well as systems, software, and data. And then finally, there we go. Please report even near misses because all these little jigsaw pieces do help us, well, not me, but help us shut down organization, criminal gangs, individuals, because you don't know what little piece of the jigsaw you might have. It might be just a phishing email to you that you're ready to delete, but if you report it, they may have forgotten to put a proxy on that so that you can trace them to where it is. You can map that as the police to all sorts of other things that they've done. So if you do, suspicious email reporting service is a big one that most people know. Report at phishing.gov.uk. Messages or vishing numbers, if anybody remembers the word vishing, voice phishing, if somebody calls you up and goes, "Hi, my name's Sam and I'm calling from HSBC," it's not. Those numbers can be forwarded to 7726. If you get a cold call from your bank about potential fraud, just hang up and call 159 to speak to your bank. If HSBC, who I used to work for, remembers the training I give them, even if it's a legitimate call, they'll be absolutely fine with that. They should put a note on your account, but they don't always, because call centers. They've got all sorts of stuff going on. If you have suddenly been hacked, lost money, or gone through a near miss, please do report it. It used to be action fraud, and I keep calling it action fraud, but it's now report fraud, which is really difficult to say report fraud at report fraud, but whatever, they've changed the name, that's fine. Website reportfraud.police.uk, same numbers, it's always been 24 hours. They're usually pretty helpful. If all of this I've just gone through is in the reporting and you're a bit stressed, you're a bit unsure, there's a lot of stuff going on, I have put a link on there, which is they love their acronyms of the government, the Cyber Incident Signposting Service, CIS, for guidance. All that does is it asks you a few questions and then it tells you the best route to go to reporting. And that is everything from me.
Amazing. You have both covered so much there. That was really helpful to kind of bring everything together. Um, I think thank you very much to both of you for doing that. I mean, cyber clearly is still a problem. You made that very clear at the start, Curtis, and it's really helpful to ask ourselves what those 6 stages will be. What will we do at each of those stages to really bring it to life and understand how we will act and what we need to do and how we need to kind of prepare ourselves. And I know you can support organisations in that space. So if it's a bit overwhelming for some people, like it was a little bit for me, understanding all of that stuff and paying ransoms, board level decisions, etc., I think would be really helpful for people to be able to reach out to both Sam and Curtis for further support and guidance if needed. And Sam really helpful on the sort of the DSPT, Cyber Essentials. Is it NIST, NIST, and ISO 2000, MSPs? Lots of acronyms, lots of support, but there's lots of free support out there, and we'll make sure those slides are shared so everyone gets access to those and they can kind of work on it themselves directly. I think particularly helpful is actually the points that you're asking your cyber organisations or your IT organisations rather than the do you, the how do you. That's a really great bit of advice. And thank you for that. I think the certification checks are going to be really, really important. But again, if in doubt, ask Curtis because he can help you with that due diligence. So the links and all the hints and tips are great. I like the point about the BCPs. It reminds me when we go back to the Millennium Bug and we all started looking at BCPs and we didn't really know what a BCP was before the year 2000. But having it printed, as Curtis put in the chat, is really, really important because if you get locked out of your systems, like those emergency contact numbers, like the BCP, you need to have that paper version. And we as the care sector, we're used to reporting near misses as slips and trips that didn't result in injury or accidents because that's how we learn from them. So yeah, reporting and working on near misses is something that's really, really important. Now, I have had a few questions, so let's go straight into questions. You may have answered it, but I didn't hear you answer it. You mentioned about DSPT category 3, and one of our colleagues asked for a clarification. Can you just quickly clarify that for us, please, Sam?
Yes, sure. So the DSPT is an NHS built system, and there's a huge list of questions for the whole thing. But those questions are personalised across basically 4 different categories. Category 1 is your NHS and your ICB trusts. Category 2 is IT suppliers and something else which I've forgotten. Category 3 is your social care, it's your other, it's businesses, and category 4 are GPs because they're not very good at computers at all. It's not exactly like this, but generally speaking, category 1 is the stricter version, and category 4 it's still strict, but it strips a lot of the technical checks out that you need, which is why category 3 social care is specifically worded to try and help rather than in techno speak.
Cool. No, thank you for that. And Karen, I also asked a question in the Q&A, but I'm not sure whether Karen was on the one where we covered passwords. But Karen says we recently been told that industry opinion has changed when it comes to regularly changing passwords, and that strong password credentials is better. Can you comment on that, please? So I think that's changing versus strong credentials.
Yeah, Curtis, hopefully we'll agree on this, but yeah, I agree. Don't constantly change passwords because that just builds bad um, password building. You end up just putting 123 at the end or a month number or something. It just makes it much easier for people like me to guess. Have a really good password with breach monitoring, such as through a password managing. If it gets breached, then change it. Otherwise, just have one really good password. I don't know if Curtis, if you've got some.
No, fully agree. So as Sam kind of said earlier as well, you should have different passwords for different services. So the password, so to answer Callum, I've just seen your messaging, you don't need to change the password at all. Now that's the new advice from the NCSE fairly recently is you don't need to set it to renew. You only change your password if you think the password has been breached. Or the only caveat I would give is, or if computing power suddenly increased massively and we said you started hearing advice saying your password should now be 25 characters long, not 12, then you would go back and you would change the passwords to the 12 characters. But my strong recommendation is that you use a password manager. The password manager I use myself and I recommend, I'm not affiliated to them at all, is 1Password. It does the right thing. And if you are looking at a password manager, follow the advice that Sam and I have given you and make sure that you're using the right one. So for instance, I don't recommend using LastPass because they were breached twice, and I don't recommend using Kaspersky because they're Russian. So it's looking.
I used to use Kaspersky, and then I was like, oh no. So, yeah.
Shame, 'cause they're a very good company, but it's just
Yeah.
there are obviously political issues there. So, yeah, I highly recommend using a password manager. But the key part is that your password is complex. So it is more important that your password is long and has uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols than it is that it's easy to remember. So as human beings, we like patterns. It's just the way that we're biologically driven to do. So the strongest passwords are going to be either if you make 3 random words. And I always go with use a verb, use a noun, use an adjective. So beautiful biking tree makes no sense to anybody. So it's harder to crack as a human. And you want things that do naturally seem different. But the easiest thing to do is use a password manager. Then you only need to remember an individual password, hence where the word for 1Password comes from, 1Password. You just need to remember the password for your password manager. So you make a complex, long password for that. I'm also a big fan of password phrases. So it's effectively something like, I always keep my laptop charged. And then you can make that different up and down cases. That's not my password, obviously, because the key thing with passwords is you don't tell anyone. So
Yeah.
make it complex,
Yeah.
passphrase or something, and then you use that password to then protect your other ones. So highly recommend using a password manager.
My mini tip and hint would be to use a pound symbol as well as in our currency symbol, because it's not on a lot of Asian or American keyboards. And when I try and brute force things, it's often not in the default of what I'm trying to brute force.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, you mentioned 1Password was one of the ones that you've used before. Now, there are some organisations that share passwords for certain systems, so the whole team gets access. What are your sort of thoughts and comments on that?
If you are doing it, so I run multiple organizations, and in some of them we need things like the to bank accounts or for administrating IT. Now, the best practice is always to have an individual account. So you should have an individual account. So Sam should have one account, I should have another account, Richard, you should have your own account, and we each have our own password into it. But we know that sometimes that's not the reality. So taking a simple option, for instance, everybody wants the Netflix password. Everybody wants it because everybody needs it in the household. The wonderful thing about pretty much every password manager is that they will have, they call it different things, but it's usually like a vault or something where I can say, right, okay, well, actually, for the purpose of this webinar, we need a joint password. So I'm going to make a password in my password manager, put it into the vault for care webinars, and I'm going to give access to that vault to Curtis and Sam and Richard. And then all 3 of us have access to that password. What's wonderful about that is then if you change that password, nobody even needs to know the password. You don't even need to know the password has changed because your password manager knows it. So when you go to use it, you're just copying and pasting the password in, or it does it automatically for you. You don't know that it's been updated. So really, really useful, particularly for IT admins, where if you do have a kind of admin password or something that you're using, again, best practice is you should have individual named accounts. But if you do have a reason for a shared password, then put it into a shared vault within a password manager.
Brilliant. Yeah, I know some people, when staff leave, they have to sort of change all the passwords. It just gets a bit challenging, but it's definitely something to consider. And I think with webinar 1 and webinar 2, we touched on passwords. Webinar 1 was the one where we mainly covered passwords, wasn't it? So we'll make sure you get the links to that, copy of the recording as well. Curtis, you also mentioned in yours, you talked about IT managers, DPOs, CISCEs, I think it was, emergency planning teams, CEO, board, directors. And now, from a legal perspective, kind of who's ultimately responsible in an organisation for preventing a breach in the first place, for taking those steps to make sure the preventative measures are taken? Because a lot of the smaller organisations that are joining us today do not have all of those different levels of people in their organisation.
So ultimately, if it were to be something that came down to law or legal issue, then it will be the ownership of the company, and that depends on how the organisation is set up. So for instance, if you're a sole trader acting as a consultant, then the buck stops with you because you're a sole trader. If you're a limited liability company, it's then with the board of directors and that sometimes is deferred to the chief exec. So it depends on how that organization is built up, whether it's 10% between 10 people, or one person that owns 100%, or two people that own 50%. So anything related to the legal health and safety for your individuals in your organization, so that's your staff, as well as then any legal obligations you have to protecting the public, would fall down to the company's ownership and company senior management. So that would be chief exec, etc. Around it, there's a slight caveat that data protection officers, so data protection officers for data, they are also the person that's held culpable. And just a side note, because we've actually now seen legal precedents of this. So data protection officer is the person responsible for making sure you're in line with GDPR. Somebody should be a data protection officer if you are handling data, and they should be qualified. If it's a case of you don't think you're qualified, there are reasons and restrictions on ICO's website. You can just go to ico.org.uk and you can see whether you need a DPO or not. So if you're an organization less than 250 staff and you don't do any special category data and you don't monitor for data, then you probably don't need a DPO, but you still need to have a data protection representative. The difference is just that they don't need to be qualified, but they still need to be the person who's in the know. So I would still recommend you get them qualified as a DPO anyway, even if you don't need them legally. You can also outsource a DPO, so you can hire somebody like me to be your DPO for you on your behalf, and they just help with it. They become responsible but not culpable. So they are the person responsible for making sure everything is done within the organization, but whether it's internal or external, they are effectively just an advisor to the board. It's still the board's responsibility and the management's responsibility to make sure those things are put in place. So it's a bit of a difference. And the precedence I was talking about is the CISO for TSB. So he was the CISO as Chief Information Security Officer, so basically head of information security, which sometimes includes data and IT. So it was the CISO for TSB was fined personally. So TSB were fined, but also the CISO for TSB was fined for being negligent. And that's the first time we've seen that happening legally in the UK. And I think that was in 2022. And people remember when the TSB app went down during COVID. Remember there was a whole couple of weeks where no one could access their internet banking, particularly if you were with TSB. That individual CISO responsible was fined. So that's very different in a very, very large bank that, the entirety of the UK as a customer database and everywhere else. So that's slightly different, but it is the first time we've seen an individual being held responsible that was not a director or had management expertise. So this is not fact or gospel, this is just my personal opinion. I don't think it'll be the last time we see that. I think we'll head towards a kind of era where we start having people being personally fined for things, but that will always come with caveats, the same as DPO, etc., that it will be kind of limited depending on what you've done. I can see the related question with the level of training. So you just make sure that your level of training is either NCSC assured, so that's the National Cybersecurity Centre of Excellence. National Cybersecurity Centre. Cyber Centre of Excellence, got mixed up my own organisation. So just make sure it's either assured by them or that it has a similar level of assurance, so that you are same kind of thing as what Sam said about cybersecurity for an MSP or an IT provider or cybersecurity provider. You're just making sure that they are qualified to give you the DPO training. So my own recommendation is if it's less than 1 day, it's not enough for a DPO. So DPO proper training should be about 2 days, 3 days long. It would only be 2 days if they're really, really cramming it in. But I would say going for three days of training, and you're looking for, there are differences between the role of a DPO, for instance, and then actually becoming a DPO. So I'm a qualified DPO, and my training course was 3 days, which is why I think that was the recommendation. I don't think they could have really done it faster. The other part then is also keeping that up to date. So I qualified as a DPO in 2017 before it was even enforced. The difficulty then is making sure it's kept up to date, because I qualified in GDPR because it was only one, and then Brexit happened, and now there's GDPR UK and GDPR EU. So you then need to keep on top of it. So it's worthwhile highlighting one person needs to be responsible for this to just guide the company, but that does not mean that that individual is legally responsible. So a long answer, sorry, but that was an important one, I think, to get right.
Yeah.
It was a long answer, but yeah, very important. But again, for smaller organisations, they can outsource that to someone who can support them, basically, which I think
Absolutely.
is helpful. I just want to go, Callum also asked a question there around, would you recommend the use of Microsoft tools such as Purview for making self-assessments such as Cyber Essentials easier?
Personally, I think anything you can do to make it easier is absolutely sensible. So if you can use tools that you've got to make it easier, yes, just make sure that the outputs of what you've done have been checked by a human. I mean that both Purview or whether you're getting assistance with any kind of AI tool, because again, kind of similar to what Sam said earlier, the output of any of these tools is still your responsibility. It doesn't matter whether it was automated, whether it was calculated, whether it was an algorithm or processed in any kind of a manner. It's still you're responsible for the output. So absolutely do anything you can, use any tools available to be able to speed that up. But just remember that those answers still need to be answers that you would, to relay from the previous one, that you would stand up to in a court of law and say, yes, I said that. So,
and if you go with a good company that's going to help you through Cyber Essentials, they'll go through that with you as well. There's loads of really good like scripts on GitHub and stuff to help you out.
But it's the principles that you're following, because there's two parts for certification. Having the certificate to say, yes, I've got the shiny certificate, which helps for things like Sam said, for when somebody is reviewing you, you can say, look, we've got the certificate, we've done the work. But the reason you're actually doing it in the first place is to make sure you've done the work, is to make sure that you are protected. But just keep in mind that Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus are points in time. So on that day, you were meeting the obligations. What you need to be getting into is that cybersecurity becomes business as usual. So it's every day that you're meeting those principles.
Now, there's another question here, which is it's an interesting one. In terms of the digital switchover, so by 2027, we'll be losing analog and we'll move to digital. A lot of systems will run from that computer. So you've had an incident, you've shut the computer down because you've got you've lost all connectivity. You're not necessarily just losing data. It could be that your door security goes to open because all of a sudden, you've got no connectivity. It could be that your phone lines are down because you're using voice over IP. There could be lots of your nurse call systems not working. None of the little devices that you're using are working. Other than the obvious that you talked about with the BCP as having a printed copy available, having those emergency numbers available. But what else should providers consider when there is an incident? What other systems could they potentially lose?
I mean, up to anything really. Anything connected to a network is the easy answer, which is why segmentation can be important with stuff like this, where you prioritize your different systems. I think Curtis, you might be able to go a bit more technical than me with that, but yeah, anything connected to the internet is potentially liable. As you say, doorbells, phone lines, once we do switch over to broadband, stuff like that. Your meter readings, all sorts of different things could potentially be impacted.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So the Internet of Things, which is things like
I nearly said IoT, and then I was like, no.
Smart fridges, things like that, is what we collectively call IoT. So Internet of Things is basically any kind of smart device. There's also OT, which is operational technology. So that's things like elevators and escalators, like lifts, etc. that you would think. So, for instance, a lift, you might think, well, there's nothing to do with cybersecurity with the lift, except there is. Because that lift, and think of the brand that everybody is thinking of, but I'm not going to say out loud, but think of that brand that you see every time you go to a lift in any kind of public place. They have the strong obligation to the public to make sure that that is obviously maintained. So how do they do that? Every time that lift goes up and down, there is a track noted to say, right, okay, well, it's done this many runs, because effectively there are pulleys and fan belts and various other kind of parts that are in it, and they need to keep a track of how many times it's been used in order for when they need to do the servicing. Same kind of idea as mileage in servicing in your car. Same idea, but for the lift. Now, they're obviously not going around to every lift individually and saying, how many times have you been up and down today? They are getting that electronically. So it's going over the internet, which means that if it's coming out, there is a way back in. So if I were being particularly nefarious and I really wanted to cause a lot of damage, I could go to a hospital, for instance, and I'm using this as an example because we've done it previously, where we've in a hospital being redeveloped, I might add, there were no patients in it. We just did it as an example, where we were able to stop all the elevators between floors. Now, we were doing this as a demonstration of why you need to think about operation technology, because if you think, well, if we were able to get into that, and it's because it was connected to their Wi-Fi, and their Wi-Fi had bad passwords and blah, blah, blah. And if we were able to do that, somebody else would too. So we were able to do a scenario kind of like this, except we were doing it on a hospital level of, now imagine we've called an emergency, all of your surgeons have gone into the lifts, and then we've trapped the lifts between the floors. And then the fire alarm's gone off, that kind of idea. It's just very easy to cause pandemonium. This is the part where Sam and I were saying, have fun with your scenarios, be ridiculous. The worst of a scenario that you can think of, the more, yes, you feel kind of panicked with it, but the better your plans will be as a result, because you've got the absolute worst case scenario and you've got a plan for it, and then you can work backwards from there. So I went off on a bit of a tangent, but any device can be used if you have the mind.
It's very important with the way everything is going to online, and just telephone lines. If you I know you've got a very catchy little the 4S's, isn't it, that you're going to tell us of how to remember what you need to do. But one of those is shutting your laptop. when you shut your laptop and you can't actually find a phone number, or your telephone's not working, you need a mobile phone. So you need to make sure you've got a contingency in place. What do you want to just talk us through your sort of snappy, easy way to remember
I will do,
what to
yeah, and
do
I'll
with it?
I'll put it into the chat in a second as well, so that there's a cheat sheet coming out with the slides that will have this on it, so you don't need to worry about remembering at the moment. It will be in that that document that's coming out after the slides. But it's something that Sam and I were talking about, kind of like the same ideas when seatbelts first kind of came in, and everybody had the I can't remember what the thing was.
Is it click?
Click.
Click.
That's it. Yeah, so for putting your seatbelt on. So if there is ransomware that's on your machine, easy thing to be able to send out to all of your teams and to remind them. And the strong thing I recommend in doing your training is snip, snap, shut, shout. So snip the internet connection, snap a photo of the image so that you can then talk about it and you can tell other people about it. So snip the internet connection, snap a photo of the message that comes up, shut down your laptop. That bit might be conscientious, I'll come back to it, and then shout about it, as in shout to your IT, shout to the people standing to the left and the right of you, and make people aware of it's happening so that they can also snip the connection, snap anything that's happening, shut down, because you can then quarantine it. So it's just so it's easy for everyone to remember: snip, snap, shut, shout, so that you are doing it. The reason shout might be controversial comes back to the part that I said about whether your organization wants to investigate or not. If you have a very strong forensics team, they might not want you to shut down the computer because they want to be able to put forensics onto it to do it. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and for my own personal professional advice, particularly if you're a small organization, is ignore the forensics part because it's not
I
the right thing.
sadly agree. I love my forensics and IOCs, but yeah, I think you're right. Ignore that for now.
My own part of also running a small company is I'd rather shut down the computer and have to bin the one computer if it was something like that because I shut it down quick enough and just never touch that computer again and buy a new computer than spend a lot of money trying to stop it and then it inadvertently gets onto somebody else's machine and then spreads. So that's just my own opinion. For other people and your own organization will tell you, so that follow their advice please over it. But snip, snap, shut, shout is still the basics. Shut might just be shut the connection or shut something else, or it might be shut your lid but not shut down. So it's shut deliberately because it might be shut down or shut your lid. Speak to your own IT team and make your own decisions. But if you're a smaller organization that don't have it, my recommendation is shut down your computer.
Yeah.
And don't turn it back on. That's obvious.
No, exactly. And this is why I was talking about if you are so small that you only have an MSP to go to for help and they don't have any incident response training or ideas, and you get a ransomware, they might not be able to help you. So you'd have to go to somewhere else to get an incident response team in. Whereas if you've got that built into your MSP, it's something that they can help with.
Yes, I agree.
Brilliant, thank you. Just very quickly, you put a linking for the DPO course. I wonder whether you could actually link it to the specific course because Lisa's struggling to actually find it. I've got another question here, and we touched on it, and Sam did mention it, but Denise wrote one of the questions there is, do you have templates for public-facing messages? And I know, Sam, you covered that by saying it might not be possible, but I'm wondering, is there some kind of a little cheat sheet or almost a guide we could give people to say, well, actually, if you are going to do a public message, this is what you might want to consider if we can't provide that actual message?
Yeah, if we haven't got something, we'll happily do that digital care hub. I don't know if that's something you do, Curtis. But as I say, it won't be possible to have a template for everything because there's a million different things that could happen. But it'll be here's the things to think about.
Fabulous. Oh gosh, that's a big list. Right.
Don't worry, I've just put that list in for anybody who needs it immediately. So snip, snap, shut, shout. I've just copied and pasted that from the PDF that everyone will get a copy of afterwards. But it's just so you've got a quick note on it. I'll have a look into DPO training. But Lisa, if you email us, then we can have a look for the kind of course that suits you, because there's lots of different ones that can be right, but you're effectively looking for one that's either been NCSE approved or as a qualification rather than just a kind of training course. So that's the main.
Yeah, I don't. There's not like a course called DPO.
Yeah, and there are thousands of providers for it. So you're just looking for one that seems. If you're looking for one that's a couple of £100 and it's kind of an afternoon, that's fine. But I would say that it's just that you're only going to get an afternoon's worth of information. So it's going to be effectively an extended version of what we've done today. It's going to be a discussion around it, and it's going to kind of be introduce you to the principles of it. If you really want to be able to actually live and breathe GDPR, you need that kind of soak time. So I highly recommend going to them. Depending on the kind of learner you are, you might decide to go in person or do it virtually or learning part-time, depending on your option. For myself, I prefer going to them in person because you are less distracted, you're focused, and most importantly for me, because the way that I learn, you're then discussing it with other people in the classroom. So you can chat through and say, that made no sense to me, did it make sense to you? No, it didn't. Okay, let's ask the teacher, that kind of thing. So it's just that you've got the chance to do it.
I've got another one here. What are the most common mistakes you see care providers make when responding to cyber incidents? That's a good question.
Oh,
probably partly. So from my side, I already kind of covered it, but not having a plan beforehand for reacting quick enough. So your entire organization should know how you want to act. So everybody in the organization should know this is the point of snip, snap, shut, shout. Everybody should know the actions that they're meant to take if it pops up. If a ransomware image is popping up on Sonia's computer down at the end, and she's just leaving the computer and running up and leaving her computer on to go and tell IT, or she's not sure about it, you are wasting vital minutes that it can now be spreading around to other people. In this kind of case, we need to remember that this moves as fast as the speed of electricity and the speed of light. So those seconds do count. If it's a case of, what did I say? Sonia knows to snip the connection, shut down her computer, and to take a photo and then run, then at least you have bought those seconds and it's not spreading to other people. So my main point would be make sure everybody is on the same page. And if that means you're saying the same thing and the same message every town hall or communication for the next 12 months, it's not wasted time because you're just making sure everybody is aware of this is what you need to do when this happens. So my point.
Agree. And I know it's really difficult, especially in our sector, but a lot of people seem to use templates and they'll buy something and they'll put it in and go, there we go, our policy is done. Wipe the hands and go carry on with work. And it's not like you really need to embed them. Like BCPs are living documents because if something happens, not just buy it off the shelf and there you go, you can tick that you've done that. It just doesn't work like that. And when an incident happens and you're looking at a BC, and I've seen BCPs that have university names on them rather than the organization name because they've borrowed a template. Nothing wrong with borrowing a template to give you an idea of how to start, but you need to embed it into your own organization's culture. How how it works, what software you use, what hardware you use, and things like that.
Yeah, my other bit of advice that is overlooked for tabletop exercises is you want everybody controversial in the room. So bring your devil's advocates to the room because it's when they absolutely soar. So everybody can think of a person. I'm sure you're all imagining the person right now that when you say blue, they say red automatically. But this is the scenario that kind of thinking is really, really helpful because you want to go, well, actually, no, our data is backed up for somebody else to say, but is it? Because that's where your BCPs are going to be strengthened from it. And then the other part is burnout. Just make sure you're factoring human burnout into the equation too.
And I think this is a very difficult question to answer, but what does good enough in terms of cyber preparedness look like for those smaller providers without IT departments?
Do you know, that's a very, very good question, and it's a very difficult one because
it doesn't.
the cyber side of us will always say it's never going to be good enough because you should be continuously improving it. So that's going to be my good enough. Your good enough is only good enough if you are continuously reviewing it, because you should be looking to say, right, is that good enough today? And then I'll do better tomorrow. As long as then the next day you're looking at it and say, how can I improve this? So if you absolutely must have a kind of good enough part, your good enough must only be, well, what are we doing today to improve what we had yesterday? And that should be the case across not just your service delivery, but particularly for your cybersecurity. So, okay, today we don't have a tabletop incident exercise, but we've got one booked in for next week. So tomorrow I'm now going to look at, right, well, now, or, it might be next week, depends on your capacity. We've now done that. Let's have a look at our BCP. We don't have a BCP. Okay, let's improve that bit. So my recommendation is focus on one thing at a time and improve that. But start with your heavy hitters. If you don't have an antivirus, do that first.
Yeah.
You don't have good password hygiene, do that next. If you don't have a tabletop exercise, do that next. So that kind of thing. So the first point to start, if you're unsure, is get everybody into a room and do a mind map, work out everything you do have, everything you don't have, and then start to close out the gaps. And if you need support with that, we are of course happy to help. So just give us a shout.
Yeah. I think that links to the question I was going to ask. You've kind of answered there, but if you've both talked through so much today, and I would imagine some people will be a little bit overwhelmed with what they've heard. But with the old adage, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? What's the very first thing people should do after today? What's the first thing they should do to take that first step towards what they need to do?
I'm going to go ahead and say start a gap assessment. So so that you can work out what do we have and what do we not have. And if you're unsure of how to do that and you do one thing from today, it's get the slides and run through that scenario internally with your organization, because that effectively is a kind of gap assessment. So a tabletop exercise is just a gap assessment for incident response. So you can work backwards from there. There are millions of templates online for gap assessments, but if there's anything you want specifically, we also offer cyber maturity assessments in various other parts. So you can do things. Obviously, there's a cost involved, but there are options you can do internally. If you're a small team, you don't have huge resources, and you just want to start somewhere, start with a presentation that we'll be sending out from today. Go through that scenario as a group and just work out the things that you do have and don't have, because I promise that will get the ball rolling for identifying the parts that you need to do next. So it's working out what your known knowns are, your known unknowns, and then your unknown unknowns. This is the type of exercise you need to do to be able to find out what your unknown unknowns are, so that you can then look to improve things. That would be my recommendation. Sam?
Mine would be go to a framework, because it's easy to start spiraling with cyber. I mean, that's what happened with Curtis and me, which is why we're working as we are now. We started one thing and then just kept going. So start with a framework, whether it's DSPT or Cyber Essentials, and start going through it. Each one, don't use it as a tick box. Don't say, yep, we've got that, good. Look at the question, look at what it's asking for, and go, are we doing the best version of that we can for ourselves? Remembering what Curtis and Sam said, think of adversarial training. What would I do if I was trying to break in to my own organization? What gaps am I going to use? What do I know that I can break into? So yeah, my set is go through the DSPT or Cyber Essentials or a framework that you want to pick, and it just breaks it down for you so you can start consciously going through things.
Absolutely. So that's a really good place to start. If you're doing a kind of gap assessment, you can use that effectively as a gap assessment to say, right, okay, well, let me look through this, and we'll pick this framework to look through the gaps we've got from that. And then once you've done that framework, then move on to another one and say, right, what are we covering it? So I can't recommend ISO 27001 enough, but there is a maturity level associated with it. So but you can be in line with ISO 27001 without getting certification, and that still is going to close out lots of your gaps.
Yes, that DSPT, Cyber Essentials Plus, ISO 27001, generally.
Yeah.
Now, we are at the end. I've just got one question which you have answered, but I want to kind of just end with this because I think it's a really important message. But a lot of people that are really, really vulnerable working in services are those single care homes. They don't have large IT teams. It's a registered manager who is responsible for absolutely everything that goes on there. If there is an incident in the first 24 hours, probably less than the first 24 hours, what is the first thing that a registered manager needs to do? Now, you've talked through snip, shut, and what have you, but what does a registered manager really need to do just to focus their attention if something happens?
Call your team together.
Get help.
Yeah. Call your assemble your Avengers is the simplest way to do it. So pull everybody into the room that's going to be able to make a contribution. And when I say make a contribution, running to get coffee from Starbucks or ordering in pizza is still a contribution, and it's a vital one when everyone's going to be dipping. So the first thing to do is grab everyone together who's going to be able to help. Make sure your messaging then becomes very clear, because depending on the size of your organization, you're going to have to set up a hierarchy of communication very, very quickly. If you don't have that in your organization naturally, you need to put it in place with your emergency response team very, very quickly, because you're not going to be able to update 20 people. My own recommendation, and this comes from other training, etc., that I've done, is it should be people reporting to you should be a maximum of 6. You can push up to 8 as a maximum if you've got 8 department heads, etc. But really, that's after that you lose control of who else is going on. So you need to start creating a cascade, a waterfall cascade of information going down and up. So you want the willing in the room, and also key part is make sure you've got somebody set up to speak to your IT department that acts as your translator, because what everybody does, and I cannot explain to you how annoying it is every individual manager, every individual director, every individual department head, every individual person trying to get a deadline done knocks on the IT door to ask the same question: when are we back online? What's happening next? What can we do now? So my other recommendation, a sneaky one, is give your IT department a bouncer so that somebody is standing at the IT door or in between, or if it's digital remote or whatever, just make sure there's somebody there that's basically passing on the information. So the IT team can speak to one person, and that one person is then relaying the message. It might be somebody from IT.
Really good point. I hadn't thought about.
So, and it's just because or all of you will know when you're working on something and somebody comes in and asks you something, your concentration breaks, and it takes you about 23 to 27 minutes, according to something I read recently, to focus back on the task you were doing. So every time you ask IT what the update is, you are delaying the update. So please keep that in mind, and then ask them to get an IT bouncer so that you can get the update from them.
Thank you. Thank you both very, very much. That's incredible. We've completed the session of 3. I think it's been really informative. I think we will probably do another series going forward because there's still more to talk about. We've still got to help people on this journey. Huge thank you to you both from CCOE and Digital Care Hub. Thank you for allowing us to be part of this. And thank you everyone for joining. And we look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. But we will send all of the materials, recordings, slides and cheat sheets out to you. And if you, along with contact details of both Sam and Curtis and their organisations, if you need additional help and support, please reach out because they're able, willing and ready to support you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's it. We join the other call now.